Hello Proponomics people, and welcome to my video from Good Friday the 29th of March 2024. Today I thought I'd do something just a little bit different, so I'm going to do a debrief of yesterday's Reading property meet that Adam Vickers, who's run it for I think about 8 years now, and Karen Stambridge were kind enough to invite me to talk to everyone about what's going on in the market, put an economic proponomic spin on the property market at the moment, what's been happening and what I think is inevitably going to happen over the next 6, 9, 12 months up to 5 years and then beyond. And I'm going to give you a few flavours into a few of the bits that came up in that conversation as well, because it was really interesting. So I have to give a big shout out to Adam and Karen, who do a fabulous job running the meet. They always sell out every month these days. They have about 50 tickets. There's some good active people in the room, had some really good conversations in the networking breaks. He also has some Zoom tickets available online, Adam does, so you can Zoom in even if Reading's a long way away or you can't make it that month. Or last night, I seem to be driving down in the middle of a Storm Nelson or something, I think it was. It tried its best to take me out with fallen trees and all the rest of it, but I still managed to get there and back without a scratch, so it was all good. But you can join on Zoom if you're interested in investing around the Reading and Berkshire area. And Reading is also on my hit list of places that I'd love to invest, because obviously the Elizabeth Line and Crossrail, but there's a significantly interesting bit of geography around there in general that means that area, I think, with the population growth that it's seeing, is pretty much guaranteed to have some pretty strong property price growth over the medium to longer term. So definitely of interest. And Adam's got a great network down there of trusted professionals, got his own letting agency and all the rest of it. So first of all, Adam talked us through his sponsors. So much like we do in Partners in Property, Adam likes people to sponsor who he already works with. So he's effectively verifying their work, they're people that he uses, and it's a really good, nice, symbiotic relationship for all the sponsors, some of whom attend the meeting as well. If they're not there, Adam doesn't mind doing their 30-second elevator pitch for them. A couple of ones who were there gave a bit of a longer presentation about the bits and bobs that they do, and that was fabulous. Then we had a real curveball. I wasn't expecting it, but one of the sponsors, young teenage son, 13 and a half years old, stood up and gave a book review, and not any book either, but The Chimp Paradox by Professor Steve Peters. So one of the most well looked upon educational mindset psychologists in the world, an incredible brain doctor, and a fabulous book review, much better than you would get on Blinkist or other similar places like that, with some real passion. And just amazing. I just wish I'd been reading books like that at 13 and a half years old, because I dread to think what have happened had I been. That really was very impressive and really moved me. And then we had little old me coming on for what was supposed to be a 45-minute slot. They were very kind to me. I wasn't overly respectful of the time. You would think I'd only prepared 6 or 7 slides for discussion, many of which weren't overly thick with detail. But nonetheless, I seem to manage to witter on for about an hour and a half. I think everybody enjoyed it, the ones who stayed awake anyway. But primarily, I was talking about what's been going on in the market and where we are today. So, as usual, trying to put some data around that. I did get a chance to stick a knife into the forecasters. Seems to me I'm the only person who goes back and looks at what some of the forecasters were predicting 12 months ago versus what actually happened. So 2023, they were a million miles out, with people saying minus 10%, minus 12%, minus 5%, minus 8%, all these terrible numbers. And we've got the ONS number now. It's minus 2.2, December to December, 22 to 23. Minus 2.2 is the print. That's moved to minus 0.6 for January 24 in the ONS. So even myself, 3 to 5% down is where I said we would be. So if we called that minus 4, because that's in the middle of those, I was still 1.8% too bearish, actually, as it goes. And I was primarily basing my view on where inflation was going to be. And inflation roughly did what I thought it was going to do. It was actually a little bit stronger than I anticipated last year, even though I was at the very high end of all the inflation forecasters' expectations. I was still too low, but there you go. That's how difficult it can be. But at least I was pretty close. I certainly managed to hit a barn door or two. But I went into some detail about what's going on in the broader economy. So what's relevant to us? Well, of course, inflation is relevant. Good for us. Second biggest beneficiaries of inflation behind the government. Right? The government are the ones making serious money out of this. And to be honest, as the people, we probably need them to, because we need that debt to deflate. Of course, like always, we're left picking up the tab. So with our frozen tax thresholds until the 28-29 tax year, which sickens me to say every time I think about it, but because those frozen tax thresholds ultimately we're looking at us paying down the debt. But of course, the nominal amount of the debt is nominal and is being deflated as time goes along. It's just being serviced. I think the average cost of the government debt is still around about the 3% mark at the moment, if not a little bit lower, whereas the average new debt that's being issued is more about the 4% mark. So the deficit is going up just by the nature of older debt maturing and newer debt being reissued at higher rates. And if it's issued at shorter terms, then ultimately that's costing even more at the moment because the yield curve is inverted. So we went into the yield curve in some detail, talked about mortgage rates and where they get set from, the old swaps market, where the margins are, why there are big fees at the moment, because that's bringing the pay rates down and fixing the affordability tests, quite frankly, that people are struggling with. We had some fab Q&A then. So one of the questions I want to relive from last night was a great one. I gave the example of a 75% mortgage at 6%. That's about the cost of debt in a 5-year limited company at the moment. No arrangement fees. Paragon, if you're interested, are doing about 5.89 last time I checked. No fees. So that's the cost of debt. 75% LTV. Let's call it 6%. Keeps the numbers a little bit easier. Right, let's say instead we look at 80% and it's 6.75. Right, so on paper it doesn't sound that much more expensive, only 0.75 more expensive. But how do we work out how much more expensive that extra 5% loan to value is? Well, we've got to look at the total cost of the 75% and the total cost of the 80% and see the difference between the two. But there is a bit of a hack here, right? 5 divided by 75 is a 15th, 1/15th, right? So every bit we pay on that extra 5%, we're paying 15 more times over because 5 times 15 is 75. So 0.75% times 15 times is 7.5 plus half of that again is 3.75. So that's 11.25%. And it's 11.25% the extra cost of that marginal 5% debt that we're getting. Now that might still be cheap if you're paying someone 1.5% a month interest, which would be 18% a year or more if it's being serviced. Then that 11.75 might still be good value. 11.25, might be good value. Right, so you have to think about that, but understand what I call the marginal cost of the debt. Right, it's an economic concept. A lot of people don't understand that, they don't know how to do those comparisons. So that's a key part of a bit that came out of the Q&A last night. And then there was a question on the 18-year property cycle. I have done a much longer video on the channel about the 18-year cycle, which I think would slot well into the category of Adam's rants quite considerably. But pretty much the exact summary. Fred Harrison, the economist who came up with it, smart guy, predicted the 2008 financial crisis. 18-year property cycle, sold him some books and gave him some headline, clicks and all the rest of it. It's a gimmick. He knows it's a gimmick. It's a load of rubbish, right? It doesn't even work when you go back every 18 years and see a crash. It's just nonsense. It's happened about twice. That's not enough for a pattern. That's ridiculous. But if it is true, 2026, the world's going to hell in a handcart. Exceedingly unlikely, because as I've proven with some of my works over the last 9 months or so, 9th of July 2023, my magnum opus in the supplement, looking at the real price of housing, the real multiples, right, adjusting for inflation, adjusting for wages, and proving that houses are way, way below the long-term trend line in their value at the moment. So the conditions required for a crash in 2026 would be an incredible bubble between now and 2026. If that happens, well, fill your boots, pack your bags, get your mortgages fixed, go to ground, wait for those things to crash, make sure you're liquid, and then bang, buy a load of stock. But I'll tell you now, it's not happening in 2026. We're too close to 2026 to be able to see the conditions that need to lead up to a crash happening, unless there's some kind of incredible event that we haven't seen. But even Fred Harrison hasn't seen that one coming. Otherwise, he would have already told us. So that's where we are. So that's a little summary for you of RPM, the Reading Property Meet from last night, and my efforts down there. Thames Lido is where it's held, last Thursday of the month, every time. Highly recommended, worked out really well. Had a great time, great people. Had a chance to talk about the workshop that Rod and I are doing in April on Wednesday the 24th in central London. Had people sign up to come along to the workshop, so that's fantastic. We're covering mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures and due diligence. And we're going to be doing some case studies of some limited companies that we've bought. And there's going to be some really, really high value, actionable information available on the day. It's not a funnel to another course or anything like that. It's standalone. You can take that knowledge away and you can do something with it. And it can make a massive difference, because it's made a massive difference to me. Thank you.